In today's video, I will be ranking and showcasing every single sword in Blox Fruits. This video will help you guys find the perfect sword for you, so make sure to watch till the end. And yeah, let's get right into the video. Starting off with the katana, I will be ranking this in the bad tier. Looking at the moves of this sword, they are actually pretty bad. They don't have much range and also have very little damage. So for that reason, I have to rank this in the bad tier. Next up on the list, we have the Bicento. This sword will be going into the good tier. Looking at the moves of this sword, they are actually quite interesting and also deal a decent amount of damage. So if you guys are a beginner, especially in the first or the second sea, and you are new to PvP, you can definitely give Bicento a try. Swiftly moving on into the dual katana. I will be ranking this in the bad tier yet again. As you guys can tell by the moves, it's quite similar to the katana sword, and to be honest, it does not do a lot of damage, neither it is super strong. So I have to rank this in the bad tier. Next up on the list, we have the shark saw. I have to rank this in the bad tier as well. As you can tell by the moves, the shark saw is a lot better than the dual katana and the normal katana. You can definitely use the shark saw sword to grind. But of course, grinding with devil fruits is a lot better, so it makes this sword pretty bad. Moving on into the next sword, we have the pole first form. I will be ranking this in the usable tier. The pole first form is not really good for fighting or even for grinding. Looking at the moves of this sword, they are actually pretty unique, and yes, don't get me wrong, they deal a decent amount of damage. But the moves are actually so bad that the damage does not make up for that. And for that reason, I have to rank it in the usable tier. You can use it, but it's not recommended. Next up on the list, we have Gravity Cane, and without a question, this sword will be going in the best tier. This sword is absolutely insane for fighting other people. If you guys are into bounty hunting or PvPing your friends, or you know, that type of stuff, you definitely have to give Gravity Cane a try. This sword is a must-have for people who like to PvP. Next up on the list, we have the saber sword. This will be going into the good tier right next to Bicento. Looking at the moves of the saber sword, this sword is actually pretty good. If you guys want to farm or you want to PvP, you can definitely try out the saber sword. So yeah, let's move on into the next sword. Swiftly moving on into Jite. This sword is very unique, but I have to rank this in the usable tier. As you guys can see by the moves are very unique and super interesting, but they don't do a lot of damage and neither they are good for combos. So yeah, for that reason, I have to rank this in the usable tier. Next up on the list, we have the Cutlass, and I don't think I have to say anything about this. It is going in the bad tier. Moving on into the Dark Blade, our first mythical sword. This one will be going into the best tier. This is the only sword which costs Robux in this game, but it is actually pretty solid. It is good for fighting other people, it is good for farming, and also it is very good for doing combos. So for that reason, I have to rank this in the best tier. Next up on the list, we have the Coco sword. I have to rank this in the very good tier. It has good damage, also has fast moves, and it is also very unpredictable. So if your opponent is relatively new to the game, you can definitely cook him up with the Coco sword. Next up on the list, we have the Log sword. After the rework, this sword is actually pretty decent and will be going into the good tier. You can definitely use this sword for fighting other people or for farming levels or you know, doing that type of stuff, but I would not really recommend it since there are other better options, but I'm gonna be ranking it in the good tier. Next up on the list, we have the triple katana. The triple katana will be going in the bad tier. This is basically like an upgraded version of the normal katana and the dual katana. So yeah, it's not really that special and I don't think anyone should use this sword. Swiftly moving on into the Dragon Trident. Dragon Trident will be going into the best tier. If you guys have still not obtained this sword or used it for PvP, then you guys are making a huge mistake. The moves are very big, They also deal tons of damage, like you can easily one-tap your opponents if you know what you're doing. So yeah, it's gonna be staying in the best tier. Now let's move on into the Midnight Blade. The Midnight Blade will be going in the very good tier. This sword is very unique and super powerful. If you guys get the hang of this sword, you can definitely use this for PvP and earn tons of bounty, or have a lot of fun. So with that being said, let's move on into the next sword. Next up on the list, we have the Pole Second Form. Pole First Form was in the usable tier, and this one will be going in the good tier. Pole Second Form is definitely a solid sword, but the thing is that the moves are actually pretty slow, so everybody and their mom can even escape the moves of Pole Second Form, and this is the main reason why I have decided to rank this in the good tier. Next up on the list, we have the Iron Mace, and yep, it's gonna be going in the bad tier. Moving on into the next sword, we have the Rengoku. Rengoku is actually quite a decent sword and will be going in the very good tier. Just look at the moves of this sword, man. They are so cool, and especially when you guys are using this sword to PvP, it's actually so satisfying and so fun to use. So yeah, just on my words, make sure to give this sword a try. It's absolutely insane. Moving on into the Twin Hooks, this sword is actually pretty difficult to use, but it is actually quite strong, so I will be ranking it in the good tier. Don't get me wrong, the Twin Hooks is absolutely insane for PvP, but it requires a lot of skill, and that's the main reason why I have to rank this in the good tier. Next up, we have the Shisui sword. Back in the day, Shisui was one of the best swords in the game, but now it's sadly gonna be going in the good tier. Shisui is a very fast and high damage dealing sword. This sword is also relatively easy to use, especially if you guys practice with this sword. Next up on the list, we have the Hollow Scythe, and I will be ranking this in the very good tier. It's not quite in the best tier, but it's definitely up there. Hollow Scythe is a very unique sword and has super cool abilities. It also does a lot of damage and is super easy to use. Hollow Scythe is a little bit tedious to obtain, but it's definitely super fun to use. So if you don't have it, get it and try it out. And if you guys are still watching the video till now, please make sure to hit the subscribe button. It really helps the channel out a lot. Okay, next up we have the Vondo sword. I will be ranking the Vondo sword in the good tier. This sword is actually quite decent for PvP. As you guys can see the moves, they are very unique and also they deal a bunch of damage. But keep in mind, this sword is a little bit difficult to use, but once you guys get the hang of this sword, you can definitely use it for PvP. Next up on the list, we have the Trident, and I will be ranking this in the usable tier. The Trident is not really that special. You can use it for farming or you can use it for PvP, but I would not really recommend you to do so. So yes, let's move on into the Spiky Trident. Spiky Trident, on the other hand, is a must-have. It's definitely one of the strongest swords in the entire game, especially for combos or basically to have fun with. And once you guys get the hang of this sword, it can be super deadly for your opponents. Next up on the list, we have the Cursed Dual Katana. Do I even have to say anything about this? It is going in the best tier. Cursed Dual Katana is absolutely insane. The damage is insane, the moves are very cool and very fast, and also even a beginner can use this sword. It's super easy to use. So for that reason, I have to rank it in the best tier. Next up on the list, we have the Tushita sword. Tushita will be going in the very good tier as well. Tushita is a super strong sword. Tushita is super fast, has super high damage, also is relatively easy to use, and overall it's a fun sword to use. So that's why I have to rank this in the very good tier. Next up on the list, we have the Soul Cane. This sword is not really good for PvP, but it's very good for stunning your opponents and making combos. So for that reason, I have to rank this in the good tier since it's very OP in stunning your opponents. Next up on the list, we have the Yama sword. This one will be going in the very good tier. Yama is basically like the smaller sister of Tushita. It's quite decent for PvP, also has a relatively high damage damage, but Tushita is overall better than this one. Next up on the list, we have the Warden's Sword. This one will be going into the usable tier. The Warden's Sword is definitely usable, but it's not really that special, and I would not really recommend you guys to do so. So for that reason, I will be ranking this in the usable tier. Next up on the list, we have the Sadi Sword. This one will definitely be going in the very good tier. Looking at the moves of this sword, they are actually quite unique and also deal a bunch of damage. You can also cook up some very strong combos with this sword, and that's the main reason why I ranked it in the very good tier. Next up, we have the Dark Dagger. Dark Dagger will be going in the good tier. Dark Dagger is not really that powerful, but it is also very overhyped. People think that it's super strong since it's very difficult to obtain, but in reality it's not really that special, and I will be ranking this in the good tier. Next up, we have the Shark Anchor, and this one will be going in the best tier. Shark Anchor is a solid sword. Just look at the moves, they are so clean, super powerful, and very easy to use. So yeah, why would I not place it in the best tier? Next up on the list, we have the Dual-Headed Blade. Dual-Headed Blade will be going in the good tier. This sword is definitely quite solid, especially for PvP. The moves are pretty clean, also are relatively fast. The sword is very easy to use, but of course there are better options than this one. So yeah, moving on into the Canvander, this sword will definitely be going into the very good tier. Canvander is a very unique yet a super powerful sword. It's very strong, also is super fast, and does tons of damage. So yeah, I have to rank this in the very good tier. Next up on the list, we have the Pipe. Pipe is going to be going in the good tier. It's actually quite a decent sword. As you guys can tell by the moves, they are super cool, and they definitely deal a decent amount of damage, but it's not really recommended, as I say for a lot of the swords on this list. Next up on the list, we have the Buddy Sword. Buddy Sword will be going in the very good tier, just a little bit lower than the Rengoku sword, but it's very tricky to use. You have to practice a lot with this sword if you want to use this for PvP. Like, to be honest, I'm not really that good with this sword, and I usually lose to noobs. So yeah, it requires a lot of skill, which I certainly don't have. Next up on the list, we have True Triple Katana. This one, without a question, will be going in the best tier and probably is the strongest sword in the game as of right now. Just look at the moves, they are so clean, super fast, super high damage, also is relatively easy to use. So yeah, why would I not place it in the best tier? Next up on the list, we have Fox Lamp. Fox Lamp will definitely be going in the very good tier. Fox Lamp is definitely a solid sword. It's quite similar to the Midnight Blade, but yeah, it's definitely super strong and can be used for PvP very efficiently. So with that being said, that wraps up the video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and if you guys enjoyed this video or found it helpful, please make sure to hit that like button, and while you're down there, make sure to hit that subscribe button as well. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will be seeing you guys in my next video. Peace.